Hi, everyone. Yasir here. Thanks for attending this session today. This will be the fifth one from the series of webinar that we are conducting, focusing on merchant acquisition tactics and e-commerce, a topic that we thought is relevant more than ever due to the unusual circumstances we are living right now since last year due to the COVID-19. And the topic today will be a deep dive on the sales funnels. And after the presentation, we will obviously take 10 minutes for a Q&A session with an open mic. But if you start having questions during the presentation, feel free to write them in the chat. For the ones that they are using the channel from Zoom, you can also put it on the chat so directly, and I will take care to ask them at the end of the presentation. So allow me now to introduce you to Stefan Jorgensen, our presenter for the topic today. Stefan founded his first e-commerce company at the age of 19 in Denmark while studying law. And after running several e-commerce startups in 2010, Stefan moved to Berlin and founded itembase.com, now a San Francisco-based company. His experience in sales with purchasing behaviors related to e-commerce, digital profiles from social networking, and privacy-focused law degrees have given Stefan insight into providing consumers the right information at the right time. So with no further ado, I let the floor to Stefan to start the presentation for today.
Thank you very much, Yasir. Let me see if I can get my screen and everything going here. Can you see me fine?
Yeah, we see you.
Perfect, and the presentation is up as well. Yeah, thanks a lot here, yeah, thanks a lot everybody for attending. Happy to be here today, and really excited to go through this topic. It's something we work in for many years, and it's always interesting to kind of discuss with different people what they're doing and how you can basically optimize your sales funnel towards onboarding merchants. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. As Yasir mentioned, this is a recurring event. We have a recurring webinar. Basically, next one will be on March 18th regarding content marketing strategies. And during this event today, there will be a vote popping up, so you can basically vote for some of the next topics that you want us to discuss in relation to how you acquire merchants and what tactics to apply. Here are some options that are going to pop up, but feel free to also add other suggestions or wishes in the chat, and we'll capture them as we go along. As for the agenda today, it's a little bit different than what we usually do. Normally, we do basically some industry trends and 3 case studies. We'll focus down on a deep dive on one specific sales funnel that we've seen implemented many times and sometimes very effectively, which are one of the ones we're going to focus on today. We'll have some material sharing at the end of the session. We'll have an open QA and of course an open discussion at the end. But otherwise, as for myself, my name is Stefan Jorgensen. I'm from Denmark originally. I've been working in e-commerce for the past 20 years and as an entrepreneur mostly. And if you're an entrepreneur in a small country like Denmark, you basically have one strategy available, and that's the only strategy that ever worked for Danish people, which is conquering like the Vikings. The country itself is too small to be very successful. Let's say it like that. Obviously, there are some very successful companies, but it's because they are trading across the globe and basically going out into the world, which is also what you'll probably have to do if you want to acquire a lot of merchants. And that's what we've seen now over the years, working with hundreds of different e-commerce providers in multiple different countries around the world. We've seen basically how these companies go to market, what works, what doesn't work. And one of the things that we've seen again and again is essentially, especially now with this whole transition to e-commerce, which is relatively new. If you think about it, some of these companies have been around for 100 years, especially in logistics, and have a certain way of working. E-commerce is only maybe 25 years old, more or less. So it's a very new industry still, and a lot of companies are adapting, and a lot more technology is coming into things. So we've seen typically the challenges around basically limited knowledge sharing between the professionals, so the salespeople, the marketing people, obviously typically talk together, but what about IT, product management and these kind of things? How does everything integrate together, and how is the knowledge sharing happening between these professionals? Is always a big challenge, and of course also typically the missing technical resources, which is a big problem for most, which is why we're doing this event series, to try and basically get people together, share their knowledge, and learn from each other, and try and overcome some of these challenges. And as at the same time that e-commerce basically brings these kind of challenges going to market with merchants, it also is probably the best time in the history of the world to really be selling to e-commerce merchants. You all know what happened last year and still is going on with COVID, and even before that, e-commerce is not a thing that has been basically growing slightly, but it's been growing consistently since middle of the 90s basically, and is still now growing even more today. So it's a good industry to be in. And that's what we're trying to basically help people get more out of. So today, what we're trying to dive into is basically how to optimize the sales funnel with one specific industry case study in this case, and try and dive into some useful tips and tricks. And I hope that you can basically bring some questions as we go along. So we'll be able to have them and share them basically by the end of the presentation. Before we go into the actual presentation, we are co-sponsors and co-host on an e-commerce conference by the end of April, which we'll be able to share some free tickets to. If you're interested, you can either, of course, go yourself with your colleagues, or feel free to also claim some and share them with your merchants or your partners. So by the end of the presentation, we'll be able to share that with you as well. But for now, let's dive into the actual deep dive of the sales funnel. And first, what I want to go into is obviously a quick background. So the sales funnel, which was implemented in the loyalty industry, and the loyalty solution, basically by a company that provided this loyalty solution to e-commerce merchants. And originally the company had basically leveraged the combined kind of marketing and sales team that operated autonomously from the IT department. So they would basically go out and do the typical thing, which is probably also what a lot of you guys will be doing. They implemented a typical sales funnel that started out with, of course, besides targeting, qualifying the leads, doing some demos, following up a lot, and at some point in time, hopefully getting to a proposal, hopefully also closing the clients, and then after closing, hand it off to technical support, onboarding, to basically get the integrations and all of these things going. In a little bit more advanced version, basically the funnel looks something like this. You start with the targeting. They did some outreach, they did some qualifications, they scheduled the demos. After the demos always comes the follow-ups. They try to do as many follow-ups as basically needed. It's always a hard thing to do, which we talked about in some of the earlier webinars as well. Going into negotiations, objection handling, proposal closing, and onboarding, which is a typical kind of thing that we're seeing across multiple ones, and it's also in multiple industries what companies are basically doing. And the results that they were getting were absolutely not bad. And if you would have scaled it up in terms of the results they were getting, this is how it would look like with the growth they put into their sales team over a period of around 12 months. They were getting on average 8 merchants per sales rep to basically onboard to their solution, which is absolutely respectable. And this is basically something they did by simply implementing a standard sales and marketing team and scaling up especially on the sales reps going out to market essentially. Now this is basically, this graph shows the results that would have been had they continued. This basically went on in the first couple of months until they implemented the integrated sales funnel that I'm going to talk more about here in the rest of the webinar. And then we'll show by the end of that what the differences in the results basically would look like if you would scale both approaches out into the market in the same time period. So what they actually implemented, and we helped them implement, was an integrated sales funnel, which is basically integrated with the system that the merchant uses, which is what we as Itembase typically work with. We provide integrations with all the different commerce systems, Shopify, Magento, eBay, Amazon, and so on. So we work a lot with trying to optimize the marketing and sales and onboarding flow for merchants to basically make sure that this goes as fast as possible, has the highest conversion rate. And the way that funnel can look, and obviously it can be implemented in many different ways, the way it looked here is typically we would basically almost turn it on its head. So normally you see the funnel that I explained before on the left. On the right, you see kind of the funnel that we implemented with this loyalty provider, where you actually start with the onboarding. I'll show you in a second how that actually works. So essentially, the detailed funnel I showed before, some of these bricks here, you can see that they kind of changed completely the way that the funnel works. And the way it basically worked was in step number one. We would go out and help qualify, and they would basically go out and qualify the merchants they would approach based on what shopping system they're using. For example, in this case, it's Shopify. They would go out and qualify the industry they were in. In this case, it has fashion, for example. Here's an example. They would also identify what market they're in. Sure, some of these things are something that you're doing already today, which really helps both in your email marketing and of course in your direct sales outreach. Some of the things that can be implemented on top of that and different variations that we've seen implemented is of course video, where you talk directly to the merchant. It can be some more industry keywords, like if you're providing a multi-carrier software to merchants, you obviously want to use some of the industry names in there and say you have basically shipping labels with these different carriers. Implement that in your sales outreach. In this case, it was a loyalty solution. So given that they both have access to transactional data from the banking side, and on the other hand, the merchants, what they would implement is essentially a connotation to the actual merchant in their email outreach. So they would essentially say, we've seen these many purchases coming through in your store and being registered in our loyalty application with our consumers. Don't you want to have a talk to us, basically? We've seen that your Shopify store could be optimized a lot by talking to us in our loyalty solution, essentially. So that's how they basically use the data they would have in their system to actually do the outreach to the merchants. And I'm sure many of these things is something that you already know and that you might even implement yourself. What we did and what they basically did next is implement in the sales process, instead of doing a demo, instead of doing qualification calls, these kind of things, they would basically have their sales reps, when they talk to a merchant, they would make sure that these merchants had basically operational kind of roles in the company. They would take them to the actual website when they were talking to them on the phone. So when the introduction call was made, they would say, I'm calling from solution.com. Have you heard about us? And of course, they've got an email. They probably have heard about them. Alternatively, when they did cold calls, this is basically how they would implement it. Whenever the merchant would then go to the website, they would ask them to go to the website. You're sitting in front of the computer right now. How about you go to solution.com and I'll show you how it actually works. Take the merchant to the website, and from the website, if they knew it was a Shopify merchant, which is in most of the cases were the case, they would then say, how about I show you how it works directly? How hit in your computer now, solutions.com/Shopify. And there would be a landing page that basically would show the concrete value on Shopify. This landing page would in that case not be a specific, here's an example landing page from another company called ShipBob, but that's not the point. The point is this landing page would not be a typical sales, and it would not be a typical SEO landing page. It would not be a typical landing page for marketing and paid ads. It would be a landing page specifically designed for a sales rep to take the merchant through. So it would have other elements in there. It will also have elements on there that wouldn't make any sense in a normal marketing sales page. So for example, one of the things that were tested, which actually worked very well for the conversion, was to have up in the corner of the landing page, there would be a percentage number, let's say 47%. And there would be no explanation of that number. It would just be like a discount badge with 47%, which normally makes no sense. And that was the whole point, because when they took the merchant to the landing page, so many of the merchants would fall in and be like, why does it say 47% there? And that would be a good basically opener for the salesperson. I'll let you know, and I can actually show you how that specifically works. So it would basically open up the conversation and start the merchant having questions about the solution, which the sales rep could then ask. So far, I'm sure some of you guys also have these landing pages for marketing, paid ads, whatever you do, maybe even for your sales reps to have them. Many of these pages typically lead to a lead form, or potentially even leads to nothing. They drive every merchant into the same contact funnel and do a standard demo. Instead of that, what the sales rep would do in this case would basically say, how about you click the Shopify Connect button right now, and I'll show you how it works for you. I'll just give you a straight up value right now and show you how it would work. They would take them through here down on the left hand with Shopify or any other system out there, a authorization process, and they would end up on the dashboard on the right. And this is another dashboard. We're not mentioning any names here, so they would end up on a dashboard which would show some information. It's not an empty dashboard. It's not a filled dashboard with data, because there's no data yet. Sometimes we've seen it implemented where you can basically have dummy data on there and a switch to show also the actual data of that particular merchant basically connecting right now. The reason you don't want to start filling in all the data and showing it right now is basically the following. First of all, by doing this process, a couple of things happen. You show them value directly. You don't want to show them too much value yet, and I'll talk about that in a second. The other point that you do by actually getting them onboarded directly here is you take the whole integration topic out of the head of the merchant. They don't have to think about it anymore, and that's typically what we see. And of course, that's because we work with that. We see that a lot, that merchants are hesitating in the sales process to basically close and to ask. They start to ask questions to the sales rep. Are you compatible with Shopify? Can you also do these features? Can you do that kind of integration? All of these different questions, which a sales rep is not and should not be trained to in detail ask, right? And then you need to hand them over to tech, and then they need to come back with some answers, which needs to be translated into normal people understanding it, and these kind of things. And this all always hovers in the head of everybody doing that whole process. By taking them through this process, you're already in. And even though they don't know all the technical things, they've seen that it's integrated already. So they have a different kind of conversion based on that now. They don't have that as much in their head anymore. Coming to the next point, the reason you don't want to have all the data and everything running and showing initially in here, you want dummy data, but you also want real dashboard that is filled with basically zeros or something similar, where the merchant can't really get access to it, is because the next step that the sales rep will now do is basically say, this is our do a little demoing here, but really saying, the real value that our business provides is that it helps our customers, and then do kind of the proposal, help our customers basically, make this much extra money based on our loyalty tool, or save this much money based on better shipping rates, or automate their time by managing all of these orders. But what we can do is, we'll just let this run for 2 weeks, and we'll basically see what the results will say for you as a merchant. And this is where we can implement in the dashboard. You can implement a real free trial if your solution or service does that, or if you're in a business like shipping where you can't really do that. You can say, we're going to analyze all of your transactions, and you're going to have a result by the end of the 2 weeks or 1 month, or however you want to do, that shows you how much money you can save, what the rates will be that you're getting, all of these different things. How about we let that run for 2 weeks? And if this shows you the results that you want to have, we can get going. But how about we schedule that call in 2 weeks, and we'll have some data to actually talk detail about, right? And then they would actually schedule a review session after 2 weeks, after 4 weeks, depending on the business, and tried a lot of different things. But typically the important part is here to schedule a review session that would actually go in and review the actual tool. And the purpose here would then be to say, at the end of these 2 weeks or 4 weeks, they would actually then show data in there. And you don't want to have the merchant do that initially, because you want to block that off for your follow-up meeting, where you can then go through and in the end then close the customer. Of course, what you want to do in the meantime, and that's also one of the important things here, which is where the whole system and IT and everybody can really help take a lot of the work off the sales reps, is you want to try and build it in a way so you let the system do as much follow-ups as possible, right? You want to have the sales rep have the personal conversation with the target, but you want to have the system do follow-ups in a way so you can ideally show some value in that process and remind the merchant through the system that you're having that talk in 2 weeks or in 4 weeks or whenever that basically is. So that will both basically show value in of your solution, and it will also help the sales rep essentially do more work or forget less merchants in their sales funnel. And step number 6 would then be to actually have that call. You take them back into the dashboard. Typically think they might have forgotten their login. All of these things are important. You have them on the phone nowadays. It's probably, you can even have them on Zoom or whatever it is. Try and take them through, log in together with them, go through, look at the data, make sure to engineer everything in a way so if there's a value, it works. And this is also where the whole qualification comes in. The good thing about this is you can essentially also now use that data to qualify how important that merchant is to you. And you can even have the merchant qualify themselves to you because you're now showing basically the results. And what would then happen is, based on that dashboard, there would be a direct proposal that would be implemented, and that can be done in different ways. Obviously, you can have a typical kind of upgrade buttons in a SaaS, or you can have a more digital signing proposal and Adobe Sign, whatever it might be, DocuSign document that you sign with the merchant on that specific call. So you kind of take the typical paperwork and all of these things out of the way and can close them directly on that call. And the result that they would get from implementing this process, and the big deal was really initially talking less and getting them to integrate, and then reducing the drop-off rate in that whole process, was that they would increase their merchant sales per sales rep from 8 to 42 per month. So as you can see here on the results and on the graph here, as impressive and respectable the other growth was, which was mainly driven by salespeople and more headcount, you can see it's basically dwarfed if you scale it out. And this were the actual results. So they would get around 11,000 merchants in the first 12 months after basically rolling this out. So by implementing that, you can see that can have a very big effect. And of course, this is not a result everybody gets. Some may get way different results, but even an increase of 25% in your sales funnel will do a very big impact on your overall business, especially if you have long-term contracts and lifetime value with your customers, essentially. What we do, of course, is, and we're not going to go into detail with this now, all the companies we're working with, this is in the back end way more complicated. You want to make sure you basically design all the different flows and get everything right. There's a lot of more steps than these 6 I showed here in the background that needs to be implemented between sales and marketing and IT and product management and these kind of things. A lot of things need to tie together. Where the companies we work with, we try to basically help them set up that initial flow and then optimize it as they go along, so they don't have to invent everything on their own, but they can see basically results that other companies have been getting in the market and the tips and tricks that they've basically been implementing. So that's the integrated sales funnel that we want to go through today. As for resources, we will make sure to make this recording available. In a second, we'll have a Q&A. We'll make the recording available again per email. If anybody would like to have some tickets to the conference, please hit the chat or send us an email. And as well, we had some other different documents and material on some of the previous webinars, like the top performing merchant channels or the Shopify App Store report, which is also a very interesting read, which we'll be happy to share with anybody that has attended these webinars. So feel free to reach out. And before we go into the Q&A, I just want to jump back into and say the next webinar is on March 18th regarding content marketing strategies. So if you have that date available, we'd be happy to see you again. And now I will hand it over to Yasir, who I think will pop up a quick vote here for next topics. So if you want to vote on that, feel free to also let us know some other topics in the chat if you would like to go through something else. And then we'll open it up to Q&A. So if anybody has some specific questions, we're here to help answer them, and happy to dive into any detail that you might have. So feel free and ask any questions.
Great. Thanks, Stefan.
Hit them up in the chat or whatever it might be.
Exactly. So for the ones who are attending on Zoom, actually, you can just open your mic and ask your questions if you have. One of the questions: can you create sales landing pages even if you don't have an application on the commerce systems? For example, Shopify.
Yeah, absolutely, you can. What we typically recommend you do is you have your core integrations that you have available or that you launch, and you launch a couple of integrations. You optimize your sales funnel based on that. At the same time, you basically make sure to launch pre-launch landing pages for a lot of other systems that you think might be in your target market, to start basically collecting data on that. And that's something that is becomes very important, because when you talk to a merchant, for example, let's say one of your sales reps talks to a merchant and he's selling this Shopify integration, or not the integration, but your tool for Shopify. In many cases, what you'll find is obviously that merchant is selling on other channels as well. So it becomes very important to kind of have all of these things available, and that means that you can gather a lot of data on those, even though you don't have an application, even though you don't have an integration. Of course, in this case, this is going back to what we provide as item bases, is where it's good to have somebody in the backhand that can turn on these integrations in a wink of an eye, basically. But that's a different topic. So we would always recommend you have specific landing pages for all of these different systems, instead of going around and having these, like, we're integratable with any system. It's so easy, just hook up with our API. It's very nice, but it doesn't really convert. It's something everybody's saying, but nobody really has. So the merchant doesn't really trust that anymore. So we would recommend to do landing pages for every
Yep,
system that you think you're targeting.
makes sense. Second question here. So I have merchants signing up for my service, but they are dropping off before using the full application. Any recommendation on how to avoid this kind of churn?
So can you just repeat the question?
Yeah.
We didn't get that.
So I have a merchant signing up for. So they're asking that so the company have a merchant signing up for their services, but they are dropping off before using the full application, so the full products, I think.
Got it. Yeah.
So
Okay.
any recommendation on how to avoid so this drop off?
Yeah, there can be many different ways to the reason that happens, right? It can be that the onboarding process itself is very complicated and doesn't make any sense, and they give up before they get
Mm.
to it. Like, the best example I can always give is if you, and that's completely outside of e-commerce. If you think about opening up a bank account, right? If you go to a traditional bank, or nowadays they don't have a, you can't go there anymore, but you still need to fill out all the paperwork, and you need to get all of these things signed and filled out and sent in. And it's very easy to give up on that. Whereas if you go and sign up for a Revolut account, or for a simple account or stuff like that, it's very, very well set up, and you have an account before you even have, thought you have an account. And actually, technically, on some of them, you have an account before you have an account. So you can actually fill in money with a credit card on your bank account before you even technically have their bank account. So that's one of the things that you want to look really closely at. What does your onboarding, what does your enrollment process actually looks like? Is it simple to go through or not? And the other thing is, of course, the actual value of the application. Do you request them to use the full service scope immediately, and these kind of things? If that's the case, you probably want to implement some more high touch kind of less self-service and more high-touch involvement from a sales rep, where they actually go through the applications together with them. And I know
Mm.
this is not what people want, but if your conversion is not good on your onboarding, then this is the best way to learn why the conversion is not good also. So that's a very good way to kind of implement that. So you might even want to have some of your product managers to sit in on these calls for a while to understand why they're dropping off.
Oh, there is a question from Bjorn. I like scale from maybe one sales rep to many. So you know how to set up Shopify for sales representative CRM? Like what systems you use to integrate to mobile phones?
Okay, I'm here actually.
Yeah, good.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. Well, I was just looking at I have some Shopify stores running in the beta, I guess you can say.
Mm-hmm.
There's some shops running, yes. But it's a little hard if you wanna scale from one salesperson or me as salesperson and then scale up.
Mhm.
Do you have experience in actually running more salespeople on Shopify so that but maybe both the salesperson will have just the phone and the buyer will have just the phone. So I was trying to get that to work, but it's still a little difficult to know what modules to install onto Shopify.
For the for basically the merchant, you mean, or for yourself?
For the merchant and for the merchant, I guess it's the main problem. You were showing some kind of dialogue in the beginning of the presentation where you had kind of like the customer can log into the seller's website, like web e-commerce site, for example, and then he can access the quote, or he can access you can discuss the order, for example, and
Yes.
things like that. Is
So
that what?
so maybe if you can just give me a quick background on what your service is. So what does your salesperson sell, or if it's you?
Well, it can be anything like travel packages. I have potentially a tour guide, travel site, but also merchandise like accessories for Android phones and so on. So I guess the idea would be, like you mentioned, maybe that I could be in contact with the visitors of my websites, and then I can pick up as a sales rep. I can pick up the conversation, and then I can discuss what they want and what they need, maybe.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Okay, so yeah, that's it's a little bit different use case, but it makes a lot of sense. So essentially, let me just see if I can rephrase. So you have a Shopify store running, and you're selling travel or you have different services, and you want to basically want to basically pick up, as you say, the conversation when your buyer is on the site and he's trying to figure something out. You want to try and pick it up. There are different ways to do that. There's actually some pretty cool applications there that you can use. Of course, you can use the chatbots and try and pick it up from that. But there's some, and I don't remember the names right now, but there's some very nice applications that basically pop up what do you say, a dialogue window where the merchant, where the buyer on the site can directly request a call or jump directly into a call. It can either be per phone or per of course video call or whatever it might be. But you can actually by that transitioning that conversation from your Shopify store to that potential that potential customer, so your sales rep can get to talk to them.
Yeah, exactly.
And then presenting a concrete quote. If now we're talking a little bit different here on the Shopify store, I would still assume that you wanna have your sales reps know the checkout of your Shopify store, so you can try and guide the merchant through, the buyer through the actual checkout flow. So I wouldn't implement a separate kind of quote for this. But that's just my opinion.
No, okay. But what you had, can you show maybe the one of the first slides you showed on them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just go back. So it's a little bit different because this is essentially, I think this is it, right?
Yeah, that one proposal like that is so when this is meant for when you're selling Shopify or what?
This is meant to applications, so applications that are selling to merchants, so Shopify stores, right? If I have a logistics solution and I'm selling to merchants and saying, don't you want to use my logistics solution, or don't you want to use my loyalty solution?
Yeah.
So one of all the apps basically, which is really what we focus mostly on helping that to make it easy for all of these application providers to get in touch with and work with merchants and Shopify stores.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of like the proposal from the Shopify store.
It's a proposal from the logistics provider to the Shopify store.
Shopify store. Okay.
Yeah, exactly, and say this is how it would look like with your. But it can be. I mean, there are systems, and I'm not sure Shopify. There might be some apps that do this. This is typical CRM, as you also mentioned in your questions. It's typical CRM functionality where you put in a quote, and I assume what you're doing here, you're essentially probably using Shopify to sell B2B, right? So
Yeah,
you
that's
might
right.
have a little bit customized thing you want to do a similar kind of quote. So it could be a similar approach here. So there are different tools out there. We can have a look at which ones are available for Shopify, but it's mostly CRMs that offer these built-in.
Yeah, I'm looking for some CRM on top of Shopify, like almost, because I know it's well, the Shopify can do some, but at least it can do, if you put on some modules, it can do some business to business, like diversified pricing, right? Like partner pricing or customer pricing, yeah.
Yeah.
But only through a plugin.
True. Yes. Yeah. That's also really the power of Shopify. Of course, they have so many different plugins and applications. But yeah.
That's true. But we can discuss that maybe a little later then.
Yeah. Yeah. But thanks a lot for the question.
Yeah, thanks, Björn.
Okay.
Let me just
Maybe we have time just for one question more from Twitch, Stefan. Okay, so integration is usually our bottleneck in some cases, and we usually discuss it in the middle of the sales process. The integrated funnel you showed in the slides looks inverted. When do you talk integration with your customers in general?
upfront, first thing.
Yeah.
That's what our recommendation in many cases are, because it takes it. And let's say I have two kind of points on that. First thing, you want to talk about integration. At the same time, you don't want to talk about integration. So you want to make it a very simple flow for the merchant. No, sorry, for the merchant. So when you take him to that landing page, you don't want to say, how about we do an integration right now and get your tech team, and like, don't talk on typical integration language. Just say, how about I show you right now? Let's show you right now. Hit the Shopify button. Okay, have you done that? Oh, you need to log into your Shopify store. If they need to log in, if they are logged in, they will get directly to the auth screen. And then what you want to do is just say, now hit the authorization button, and I'll show you how it works. So you want to use language that's not technical, that's not too much integration, because it is not technically, it's not needed to do technical integration if you have that available and you're on the App Store. So that means talk integration right up front, but don't use all the technical terms and don't use much of actually integration. Just do it and try and flow them through the process, essentially.
Yeah, don't enter too much on technical details.
Yes,
it's true. So I think we're good for the session. There is no other questions from the attendees. So yeah, I think we can we can end the session for today. So thanks, Stefan, again for always these great presentation, always interesting insights regarding the new trends on the sales process for companies dealing with prospecting e-commerce, as we see. Thanks for sharing again. So I would like to thanks also everyone coming by today on the webinar, on the Zoom, and also on the Twitch platform. As Stefan mentioned, we will be happy to share some tickets with you guys for the upcoming commerce show in April. Feel free to follow us and subscribe in our LinkedIn page, so you can receive more information there about the event itself. And our next webinar, so the session is going to be on the 18th of March, and we will be discussing content marketing strategy. So if you also want to have like a look on our past webinars, feel free also to pass by our YouTube channels. You can find most of them, and we are usually uploading them directly there. So good. So yeah, thank you everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Cheers.
No.